Hard Reset by Damon Yeargain. Chapter 1. Jack the Man! Superman! Jack winced at the sound of Bart's booming voice, which seemed to ricochet off every wall in the lab. At 6'4", Bart was a mountain of a man, and on an endless quest for a shirt that fit. His office was littered with trophies he'd won at weightlifting competitions, and yet had never outgrown the habit of slapping people on the back or the tendency to forget his own strength. Thankfully, Jack's spot on the floor kept him out of full reach, and Bart merely grazed his shoulder. "What are you doing down there, partner?" Bart asked, leaning over to peer at Jack. "Swapping out a motherboard, another P75. Bart let out a heavy sigh. Those were bad for everyone. The Pentium 90s are a big improvement, and the warranties on the P75s we support are expiring. Jack nodded, unconvinced. It's not that he thought Bart was rationalizing, at least not intentionally. Bart had a knack for telling people exactly what he thought, no matter what their rank or whether they wanted to hear his opinions. But Jack also knew sales. He wouldn't be surprised if they were already pitching customers on some kind of overpriced, super-extended warranty to squeeze the last bit of commission out of the ill-fated PCs. "You know, you could clear off a table," Bart added, his tone almost fatherly. "Didn't you say you were prone to leg cramps?" "I've gotten used to the floor," Jack shrugged. "We worker bees rarely have the luxury tables when we're out in the field." Bart let out a huge belly laugh. "Well, hang in there. By the way, have you seen the board? You got a job at 3 o'clock in one of those high-rises near Landmark Mall." "No, I hadn't." Jack pushed himself upright as he answered, "What's the deal?" "I believe all the notes said was, PC doesn't work." Jack rolled his eyes and sighed. "I know, partner," Bart said empathetically. "I know." The engine, which had belched blue smoke for weeks, ran better today than it had in months. It was as if the Honda heard him complain about her, and was now out to prove she could still pull her own weight. Or maybe it was the rain, which was coming down in relentless sheets. "Susan something," Jack muttered, pulling the yellow order sheet off the seat next to him and stuffing it in the visor. Probably an old lady who didn't know that to turn on the computer you had to press the power button. "You're getting paid regardless," he sighed, as if he'd been over it 1,000 times already. Given your circumstances, you should be thankful to have a job at all. Oh, Christ, he thought. If he had added just take it one day at a time, he would have sounded just like his mother. Inefficiency. That's what he wanted to answer, not to his mother, but to one of the higher-ups at Total Computer Solutions. Did they not know how much money they were wasting sending techs out on jobs that could have been handled over the phone? If it were his company, phone support would at least make an attempt to do what their name implied. Or how about asking some questions and taking a few notes, so we techs had some clue about what to expect and, God forbid, actually prepare? How could anyone think that PC doesn't work was sufficient information? And then there's those damn P75s. Traffic screeched to a halt and Jack slammed on the well-worn brakes. Instinctively, he reached out his arm to try to stop the avalanche, but it was too late. Everything on the passenger seat flew to the floor in an unceremonious crash. It served him right. He should know better than to allow himself to get caught in things beyond his control, like his job. This was just something to help his mom with the bills until he got back on his feet. Not a career move. Eventually, he crept past the wreck that caused the jam, found his exit off Van Dorn, and headed towards Yoakum. He'd intended to double-check the random McNally map at the next light, but typical for his luck, the map was one of the items that was now on the floor. He would have to trust his memory. Someday soon, maps will be relics. People would just dial in through their computers, plug in the address, and up would pop the directions. That was just the beginning. They'd be able to shop for groceries, clothes, and he, Jack Dufresne, would be at the forefront. Don't. His jaw tightened. Don't think about it. The wipers smeared the world into a blur with broken bits of red from brake lights dispersed into the watery haze. Jack rubbed his eyes and reached for the glove box to grab his Mylanta. His stomach, which had been a cauldron of acidy nausea for months, had been a relative calm today until this moment. He took 3 long gulps and screwed the top back on the bottle, the whole time trying not to think of the software he'd written. It lay dormant on his hard drive, as it had for 9 months and would, very possibly, forever. He'd designed it for online grocery shopping, but it could have easily been adapted for maps, games, and even music. The World Wide Web was catching on fast, and his software could have been the engine. The fuel. Oh, stop it! He clenched his hand tightly around the steering wheel. It's over. It's dead. Stop thinking about it. I don't get worked up anymore, Karen said at their last support group meeting. Like everyone else in the room, I don't even know if I have a future, so I've learned to just let it go. How did she do it? How did anyone do it? Jack knew people who didn't think past what they were doing for lunch, so he knew it was possible, but how? The plans, the goals. The physical part he could somewhat endure, but the dreams, how do you give those up? It seemed like so much work to be a bum. The rain slowed to a drizzle when he drove into the parking lot. He pulled the hood of his raincoat over his head as he got out of the car, then opened his hatch and stuffed as many parts in his backpack as he possibly could. In these high rises, each trip to the car could cost you 15, 20 minutes or more. There had to be a better way. Maybe cheap stowaway carts. How much money would that save? Jack dropped his bag into the hatch. He knew the answer. Not to carts, that was easy. Even a high-level manager could see the logic in that. Actually, he didn't quite have the answer, but he was close. He had that feeling again, the feeling he always got when he was about to solve a problem. Soon he'd have a solution to the phone support question that had been bugging him. He'd do it. He'd make them let him do it. He grinned as he flung the backpack over his shoulder and headed to the main entrance of the building. Maybe dreams weren't something he had to give up after all, at least not completely. He found the apartment and knocked. The door creaked open about an inch, stopping as the chain caught. Susan something was no old woman. The light from the hall illuminated the soft smoothness of her skin, contrasting sharply with her black hair. It fell past the doorframe, reappearing to caress the curve of her shoulder. Her hair was curled slightly at the end, and it glided his eyes to the base of her neck, then slowly upwards to her lips. Their movement startled him. "Hi," she said. Jack pulled his shoulders back, then glanced at the name scrawled on the worksheet. Susan Butterfinger? Botticino, she laughed. I assume you're the man who's here to fix my computer? Yes. Here's the work order, Jack said, holding it out so she could see it. It's backwards. She laughed easily. For a brief moment, her smile gave him a glimpse of a world from his past. It's okay, her voice drew him back. My guess is that you're not a stalker. She shut the door, the sound of the deadbolt clicking as she unlatched it. Subconsciously, he touched his hair. It was short, but at least it was there. The rest of his body, though, he shook his head. The bruises and needle marks were gone. If he could just make himself look stronger, less sickly. A portrait of a blond, healthy boy seemed to radiate off every wall, stand, and shelf in the apartment. Healthy. That's the first word that came to his mind so often now. Still, he was caught off guard by the wave of relief that swept over him. He had no shot, and it was probably for the best. The computer's this way, Susan said with a smile. She led him past a stack of children's toys and a bookshelf, around a corner, and then stopped when she reached a small wooden table, which he surmised functioned as the dining room table. The computer sat on a desk which was wedged in between the wall, a high chair, and the dining table. Jack imagined the inevitable arguments she and her husband must have had over the placement of the furniture in this tiny apartment.